I'll just introduce myself. I know most of us have met, some of us know each other really well, and explain why we're here. And it'd be good if we can all just introduce ourselves quickly, and maybe tell us what you would, if you've got a question or something you'd hope to get out of the workshop today. So my name's MacPhee. I'm the archivist for the Skye and Localsh Archive Centre, so I cover the Skye and Localsh area. So technically I don't cover Eigg and your community, but there is links within archive collections and historically through us. I'm obviously more than happy to help and share the different skills that Rory and I have. So today the plan, and we can go completely as off kilter as you want to help what you need as a community, but it would be look at collection management, so that's like policies, what the aims of the archive that you're setting up would be, conservation. We're hoping to do some cataloguing, so that's how you get a collection ready for a customer or a user, is sometimes a name for somebody that's visiting. And what I've done, I've just made a pretend one using copies and books and stuff from bits and pieces I had in the Skye archive. And I've deliberately made it quite difficult because it's got multimedia, different times. So hopefully we could try and catalogue that together, or even just work out the structure. And then we'll be looking at things like environmental things, like how the room's going to look, packaging I've got in front of me. So there's little bits on there. I don't think there's anything else we were going to look at today, Rory. Let's get cracking with it. Yeah, do you want to introduce yourself and then?
Of course. Thank you. So I'm Rory Green. I am Lochaber's version of Catherine. So yeah, I'm the archivist for the Lochaber area. I'm the sole member of staff in the Lochaber Archive Centre. So, like you said, you've been in touch. Sometimes things take longer for me to see to because there's nobody to delegate to. But yeah, that's me.
With it's not having an expectation that you're going to be able to do every step of this. There's certainly elements of my job that I love more than others. There's steps of certain processes that I have to get support on and ask. And we're at quite a benefit there because we're part of the Highland Archive Service. It's a huge network of us. But we are a local authority archive, so we were set up by the Highland Council, so we're under HighLife Highland, that's a charity. But some of the things we can offer use as a community and as a commonary is sharing skills. So that's what we're kind of going to look at today. So it's managing, cataloguing and storing collections. But ultimately, the key goal of an archive is to preserve your heritage, your culture of that place, but then gain access and make sure that access is done in a way that's suitable for yourselves and within guidelines around GDPR and data protection, which we'll get into and we can share resources on. We can also offer and share knowledge on things like engagement with local residents. We'll be sharing some of that tomorrow night at our talks. Working with other community groups, we can support funding applications, whether that's helping. I know we touched on it earlier when we were mentioning funding. Sometimes there's like emergency pots of money that are available to archives and history groups, and if you maybe haven't been at a conference, you might not know about them. Certainly there's loads of them I've been finding out more about recently. There's also things like offering training, so whether that's what we're going to cover today or specialists from Richard, who's our conservator, and that would be things like disaster planning for the worst case scenario, flood, fire, pest infestations. We also offer exhibition spaces, workshop spaces, and links to other heritage professionals within us. So it's good to work with us and we can support each other. That would be really great. So I was going to start us off looking at collections management policy documentation. So my question to you are, do you have a collection policy or a mission statement of this project that you're looking to do? Is that something you use?
What do you mean? Like, I think Lucy's got a very clear mission statement for that part of the project, but as a history society we have quite a wide-ranging policy, which is to preserve and present the heritage of Eigg.
Yeah.
So we don't have any more precise mission statement than that.
Cool. So when and I've taken copies of ours, so we can leave them. They are accessible online, and you can view many other archive policies and collection. So these are really good foundations to have in managing a collection about the community archive. It means that everyone's working towards the same goals. It also acts as a tool to continue the work in the archive in the long term. Also supports funding applications, because they'll say to you, you know, what's your access policy, what's your collection policy. So like within the area I work in, everything I take in has got to be from Skye and Localsh, and Rory's is Lochaber. So if I got something from Lochaber, I would then be, Rory, I've got this, is it of interest to the archive? And we would transfer it down, and vice versa. So it's really getting those things cemented in, setting really strong foundations. So you can have mission statements, collection statements, and access statements, so how that's done, preservation statement. And before starting, we always say decide who's going to draw up the document and work together. So it can be agreed on. Now, when these get redrafted within the Highland Archive Service, I'm quite glad to say it's not us that do it, but it is our senior team. But they do involve us, and we get to read them. And it is fascinating seeing the work that goes into them. So I would always say, look at what's out there, see what fits for you guys, and look what's happening across Scotland and other areas. You're never going to get everything on the first attempt, and date each version as you're going, so you know where it is. So the mission statement is the answers on what we do and what's our purpose, which you've already got, that's there, and that's great. And the mission statement should just be short and on to the point with a couple of sentences. So it's like why we do this, and then something, you can have a little bit about us. A collecting statement is really important. It sets out what you are collecting within the archive. It allows you to focus your time and resources on the items that are most important but also relevant to the community, and it helps you say no to items that fall out with that area. It is a lifesaver having a policy there, because somebody might, and does happen to us, they come to us, it is something of historical importance, but it doesn't belong to Skye and Localsh. So an instance of that for me was something came in, but very, very important historical documents for the Isle of Uist. I contacted them in the screech from the archivist, because she was like, oh, you know, these were so important. So I got the next ferry and went over, and then we spent the next day hanging out, seeing what they were offering at the archive. But I know by taking it in and going, this is really important, but this doesn't belong to me, making sure it got home to the right place. So, but it does give you the option to say no to people if it's something that you feel might be getting pushed upon you or isn't relevant. On there, if you get anything on that.
Well, I was going to say the flip side of that is you might get something that isn't by any means important, and you have a reason to say no, we wouldn't take this. You know, so you might get. So, for instance, I got somebody. No, I don't know what it does. It's a machine that does something, and somebody dropped it at my door. I don't know who it was that dropped it at my door. I just had this thing, so now it's just a decoration in my office. So it's a good way of saying that we don't just take anything. You know, if you have a more kind of precise list of things you do take, then it means that you're not just going to get them left with all sorts of things. You know?
Yeah, it was. So it's always good. Sometimes a mess is good, because you can go through it and see what's important and different eyes, different ideas on what should be saved and what isn't. So that's where the collection statement's really going to support you. So that statement would include the types of items you want to collect. So original documents, that's always the preference, is the original. So I've taken a document. This is from my own archive. So this will get put into the archive in Skye. I've just not done it yet. So this is an original document from my family on my mother's side were settlers to North Talisker. 100 years ago, through the Land Settlement Act, and these are the original documents. So we're actually going to, if we get time, we're going to have a shot of cleaning these today. So these are what we would call original documents. These are what you would prefer, or having the original, that's what we prefer. However, we do take steps if that isn't the option, and we do digital preservation and take a digital copy. But we'll get to those, that's the kind of ideal. Also things like objects, books, items, digital photographs. Now, our archives are quite different. I came from a museum service originally, so I've got fossils, archaeology collection, textiles, paintings, prints. And our collection policy is that we don't take these things unless they're part of an existing collection.
Yes, and do you think do you feel that you kind of keep in line with that?
No.
Mm.
And when I was last in Eigg, that was a good case
Yeah.
of me not keeping in line with that, because we're not meant to collect artwork, and I
Right.
took the Agsaw collection because I saw its cultural and historic
Okay.
importance to Scotland, and it paid off.
Yeah.
I didn't get about.
No one.
So
I think more than happy.
I'm a risk taker.
Exactly.
I'll
you took
see,
the risk and it
I took
paid
the
off.
risk and it paid
Yeah,
off.
Absolutely.
7,638 strips later, uploaded on cam. So there is that, and also because we do have an archaeology collection, if somebody comes in with a find and it's been done in the correct process, I'm not going to say, nah, I'm not taking it.
Yeah.
I'm going to store it until the decision's made on what happens with it. There's also the geographical area. So obviously for you that's a really easy one, I'm guessing, because it's going to be the whole island. The boundaries there. Themes or topics you want to include. So like, I was going to ask actually, if you've done, because I've been reading your book because it's amazing, but has there been a project on place names done here?
Yep.
Cool.
Unfortunately, there's a problem with that.
Okay.
Father Anthony Ross came to do place names with Hugh McKinnon in the 1950s. The recordings are in the School of Scottish Studies. The map has disappeared.
Oh.
The map was with him, and when he died, the diocese got rid of everything. But we have Ian,
Yes.
we have Duncan,
Cool.
and that's one of our ambition, is to repatriate the tapes from the information from the School of Scottish Studies, translate it, or get our Gaelic speaker helpers to identify on the map. But time is running out because everybody's getting older, memories do fade, and it's quite important to do that.
The reason I was asking, another community group that I've been working with in Skye, that was something that they were putting into theirs, was place names and mapping projects. Exactly the same reasons they're seeing the urgency and the knowledge disappearing. So that's the kind of things you can put in. Also exclusions, what you don't wish to collect. So just as we've been discussing, material that shouldn't belong, or it could be stuff that's meant to be held by a record office. So that's also things like the school log, police, NHS records, something that falls into local authority records. Should come to the local authority archive. In some instances, like traditionally Kirk sessions go to Edinburgh. And that's where we have like I'm trying to think what they call it, the UHI. We've got like an agreement between, like we've got one of Salmore, an agreement on what's collected where. And there has been times stuff's come in to me and I've offered it to another archive within the area because it's more suitable to their collection than ours. Also, terms of acceptance, that's the conditions on which you'll accept the archive, and we've got guidance on that. An access statement, and an access states out how and where your archive items can be used and who by. It's really important on how that use is. So that's things like data protection, can it be published, will this be in a film, does the person, so if I've donated my paperwork to that, I would state how I wanted it to be used in access, and that data's got to be gathered on a spreadsheet. I'm looking at you, Lucy, quite quickly.
So on that, we have had, when we collected the photographs from families, we have had to ask them the permission, and we had asked them also what condition they attach to the use of the photographs. If they are happy for Community Eigg to use them for publicity purposes, for projects, etc., they need to say so. But a few families have withdrawn the right to do so unless we contact them. So if we want to use photographs from their archive, we have we've asked in the past a few times, are you happy for us to do so, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's great.
But I think that probably that would need to be revisited because it's probably not done with
GDPR and stuff. Yeah, and that's a really strong way to have them in already, and it's quite refreshing because there's a few times we've had deposits coming in where they've been collated by an organisation with no details, so that's really good. There's also things like restrictions, so you might want to not let the original materials be accessed. So this could be something, so for example in Skye the records from the Battle of Braes are highly demanded, and they're used that much that I was getting concerns about the condition of them. So our conservator did some repair work and he digitised them for me, so people can get them by email, I can print them out, or if they want the originals, it's like one item at a time and it's in special material. But on that occasion we want to encourage that, hey, how you doing?
Alright.
That the originals are kept away just for usage, to preserve them. There's also preservation statement, so that states out how you will look after the archive for preservation. So the preservation statement looks after like how and where the items are being stored, the steps that you're taking to keep them safe, a list of key holders who have access to the storage space, description of how you'll maintain access to fragile or damaged items. So for example, just we're saying photographs, and a list of best practice guidelines to ensure your ongoing preservation of the items. I'm going to go over some of them as well. So conservation, so that's like when materials come to you, how to look after them, so best practice on them. So what I've done today, I'm going to move some of this out of the way, I've taken a sample of materials that we use. So we've got our archival box, which it's all, I'm not going to know the standards off by heart, because that's what Richard does, the conservator. Archival materials, so we've got these, the gloves, you see these white gloves, what's your feeling on white gloves you see on the telly?
We get a lot of people asking to use them, but yeah, they're basically more harmful than good.
Yeah. So feel free to jump in throughout the day, because that's great. So yeah, these are what we would recommend, nitrile gloves. You don't always, as long as you've got clean hands, most documents can be handled, but things like photographs, maybe things that are quite dirty. So we had a collection that came into Skye that was in pretty bad condition, so we were masked up. So mask on, and we actually had painter suits on to protect our clothes, because there was a risk of mould, so risk of damage to ourselves, but also risk to the other documents that we held within that room. So in crazy instances, I don't know if you've ever come across any where we've had to like take stuff to Inverness and get it frozen.
No.
That can happen, and it's just to control extreme cases of beasties and stuff. And that's where we would come in as an archive service, speak to Richard. Richard would be your first point of call, our conservator in Inverness, for the kind of extreme scenarios. But if something comes in to you that has an infestation or mould, it could damage everything else that's there. So yeah, that's just, and it's some things on there. We've also got what you use to write on documents, or what you use within an archive. What's the pencil?
It's a to be. To be or not to be.
Yeah. And that's the best one that we use, and that can be written on the original documents, it can be removed, and it will last forever. We also have an archival pen. We use this in what's called our accession register, which we're going to get on to talk about as well, where everything goes on there. We also have other archival materials. I'm just going to pop this in the box so it's out the way. But feel free to kind of handle these. So these are just examples of what we use to store. So if you've got, say, photographic negatives or slides, I just took an example. There's acid-free archival standard, and these would go in folders, so it just preserves the item. We've also got the four flat folder.
Also acid-free, as is the box. Everything is acid-free, so nothing harmful is seeping into them.
There's another, just a different type of folder.
Well, this one, what do you call it?
Sometimes I've heard Richard call it Millimex. I don't know if that's right.
Millimex, right, okay. So we would use this for essentially display, for the purposes of displaying really a fragile letter, something that you wouldn't really want it to be handled too much. So our jacket letters that we had, every single one of them is in one of these. For that purpose.
We've used those for newspaper collections, so I managed to source A4 and A3 and A2. So all our newspaper archive that was donated to me in a carrier bag, all the bits of newspaper folded. So I'm not sure if I did the right thing, but I ironed them.
Wow.
because they were, I just could not do anything
Yeah.
else with them.
Well,
can
people
read them.
use weight, like
Weights.
weights, like piled on top of the weight. We've got like kettlebells sitting on
Yeah.
some stuff in our archive.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can use just to weigh stuff down, isn't it?
Heavy books.
heavy books,
Yeah, so these come in a different set, like so photographs, so it's photographic negatives, and there's loads of other different types of storage, especially boxes for glass slide negatives. You can get custom made boxes and sizes, outsize ones. So there is a whole range of materials. Again, get in touch with Richard, our conservator, because he can give the best advice on this. And you can see things online, different advice and guidance around that. But the main cause of damage is frequent or careless handling. Other factors are bad storage, so your environment, so damp environment, which we all live in. We can't kind of do much about that at the moment. That encourages mould and also insects as well. And heating as well, and then you'll get 2 or 3 breeding cycles for certain. So we have traps, insect traps, that are placed in various locations around the whole archive centre, which are changed monthly, unless you suddenly need to check them, unless you see something more on them. And then it's a quick phone call from Richard. What's this? So
Is this friend or foe?
yeah, well, silverfish, I've never seen one before.
Right, okay.
And it was not in the archival storage, it was in another room, like an office. So that got dealt with. But, so yeah, all materials they can be damaged by light. Paper, obviously, and newsprint can become brittle, discoloured. Things like the glue that's used. I've got several scrapbooks. I've got a beautiful scrapbook that was made by the minister during the land uprisings. But the glue obviously is from the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, and it's deteriorating, so everything's becoming loose. So when that goes to conservation, we'll work out a way that can be preserved. So it'll probably be separated out in some way. Again, I'll be leaving that up to Richard. So things like glues, over time, sellotape. Please, sellotape, deterioration of sellotape is an awful thing to deal with because it gets really sticky. It goes through this mad sticky stage, yellow, orange, yellow, and then it goes dry.
Yeah.
And once it hits the dry stage, it's easier to deal with. So it's just little things like that.
Same with paper clips and staples. Quite often what we'll do when kind of accessioning something is to remove paper clips and staples, to use these instead of brass paper clips. Now, can you tell me the benefits of brass paper clips? They're less likely to disintegrate?
Less likely to disintegrate, and it's recommended for holding documents. And quite often, so I'll just do it, so I'm going to rip one of these.
Rust.
No,
but you will see, if in 50 years you looked at that would be a rusty stain across the page,
Can you pass me a paper clip? So, for example, this would obviously be cut neatly normally. If you had, so say we had this document and they're stuck together, we see sometimes these beautiful big old pins or a big rusty thing, so you take that off, take it out gently. When we would then store those letters together, we would fold acid-free paper over with a clip, so that collection's still together, but it's like a double protection. And we spend hours doing that sometimes, but it can be quite enjoyable.
It's quite therapeutic. Just
Then
sit
you
in silence.
your code on the acid-free paper or whatever.
No, the code would go the document, depending on, then that comes into other conversations around some items. So if, for example, you had a document in here, so something's in there, you sometimes put an archival sticker on with the code because you don't want to write on it, and it's really dependent on the collection. It's individual for each one, and then if we get into digital, which I think might be a whole other day of training or a phone call for born digital records. So that's a really basic kind of chat around some go-to basic conservation. So a smoke sponge, this is a natural material, I think.
Sort of hard.
So we
I
get
don't know if
told.
you like it.
They come in blocks. This is just half of one. The joy these bring me at work, cleaning dust and smoke and removal.
Again, quite a nice therapeutic task.
And when you're cleaning documents, so I'll show you, and if you'll want to come and have a shot, we can maybe just do these. So these ones are, again, these are actually items that were deposited in a collection but deemed not of archival value. So these were offered back to the depositor, they didn't want them. So these were going to go for destruction. So I've had them in a box, waiting till that happens, basically. And the reason we're not keeping them is this is a duplicate of, and it's also published material. Interestingly, this book, the Donald Gillis collection, we hold that collection in the archives, so we've got the originals of the guy, these diaries that he wrote. And this one, again, there was a lot of repetition. This is a sketchbook that was in there, and it was agreed that this one, and it's quite empty, would come out. But this has the cover of like quite traditional ledgers. So you see it's got the bind down paper on there. So one thing that we do quite often use, brush. I don't know what your brush is like.
Not as extravagant as that one.
That's Skye,
Do you
can't
have
help
something
it.
like that as
I think
well?
mine comes in grey.
Does it?
Yeah.
So
We
some,
do conservation.
yeah. So we get basic conservation training, and if it's specialist. So I recently was given a quite extensive photograph collection, which was a bit out of my remit because you're dealing with different types of photographic materials and sometimes they explode. So Richard spent a whole day with me. I said that as if it was so normal. It's to do with how they're made, the chemicals in some of the old film. So there's a test you have to do where you snip a bit and you go outside and light it. So if it explodes, then it's not a good thing.
So what?
No.
Is that right?
It's on fire.
So it's if it smells like vinegar, I think, is that the?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the smell of vinegar, that's meant to be the alarm
We keep
sign.
all
Is
over.
it the negative or the print?
I'm not sure. So
It's the negative.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite often film footage, but we
Film,
don't. Yeah.
It's the kind of the,
Just keep them in a separate archive. They tend to be in like a separate store.
Specialist, yeah. And there's smells that you learn. There is a course, I think you did it as well, didn't you? The photography, film and sound that Dundee University offer around that. And I did that because we have a very extensive photography and film collection in Skye. So that was the reason I got extra training. But again, Richard just came and helped me out and it was like, right, this is how you handle them. When any time you're handling photographs or negatives, having these on is recommended instead of fingers.
so the fingerprint, you can never get the fingerprint out of a. You can never be cleaned off a photograph. It will always be there. Yeah.
So for instance, if we were to handle whatever photographs that are left in cardboard boxes and things, when we deal with them, should we be wearing these gloves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so when it comes to, if you're going to hopefully keep the originals, you can start popping the originals in these or special ones. I just took these ones because
And
they were
then
the
you can
first
be
ones.
handled all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are for film and then we've ordered some recently for a specific size of negative because it was quite a unique format she was using. So we've got them. I just grabbed the ones that were there. And then if you're starting to digitise them, any mark and blemish will show up, especially if they've been touched. And that just happens. I sometimes like the marks.
Well, that's the
photographs.
thing. You can't be too precious about it. At some point, they've just probably been in somebody's house, being flicked through by
Enjoyed.
exactly. So, but I guess once they come into the kind of the archival world, that's when you start doing those wee things.
Yeah. And we're still learning all the time.
Yeah, of course.
I sometimes get something and I go, what's this? And then I'll be like asking, get straight on Teams, messaging somebody and then reading, try to go back to what I learned or checking in a book or checking a standard on a website. And that's sometimes, I might have something sitting in the boot of my car in a box that I've been asked to go and pick up and I'm too afraid to take it in. It's sitting in one of these because of the risk or it's something I've not dealt with and it's just asking. So that's the way to do it. But getting basic training in around cleaning, handling, the use of correct materials, it will be great for you. When you're ready, evidencing what you've got. So, but cleaning, we'll do a wee quick bit of this and then we'll get some cataloguing and I'll shut up. So with this one, what we would tend to do is like brush it if it was really dirty. And even just doing that, I'm going to get a wee pile. I picked dirty stuff deliberately. So we would maybe brush the documents if they were needing them with a smoke sponge. So I just chopped one of these up so we could do it. You try and go in the direction of the documents, you're not causing any more damage. I don't know how bad this is going to be. If it's actually going to it's not that bad. I think I'm at this outside now for the pre-clean. So this was in a very dirty, damp house. The collection's brilliant, there's just a lot of stuff that we've had to make a decision. So you can see
So that's not wet, that's just sponge.
No,
Sponge, yeah,
it's
it
probably
does
fail
now.
because it does have a dead tap.
And then in there,
Absorbs the
Yeah.
dust.
brilliant. I actually cleaned a bit of a wall in my house once with one. You can see it's starting to lighten it.
But it's sometimes quite nice when you get a document to clean. It kind of does tell you where it's come from in a way, you know. Like sometimes, I remember when Richard first came down, we had maps out and they were covered in soot, so they'd obviously been some of like an open fireplace. And then more recently there was the kind of shavings from a quill in the binding. There were shavings from somebody who'd always been using a quill in this book, and they'd kind of filled the binding.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's quite nice to see those wee things.
It's laminating. That's another one that's going to be I think it's going to be an issue maybe in the future, not so much now. But I was at an event, I do pop-ups in village halls to try and help people gather documents, and somebody came in and it was an 1836 original drawing of a house, and what he had laminated but somebody else in the family had, and he was like, and I'd been just talking about the best practices, like do's and don'ts, and he was like, oh, and he's like going to kick me, and I was like, what? And I was like, how? And then I was like, how do we get that out?
Yeah.
So of course, on the phone to Richard, what happens here? But that, just him showing that one document, that's then led on to discussions about that deposit coming in, and that it's a huge collection. But he saw the need, because he's aware previous family members have kept the stuff, but their practices might, they will cost thousands to get repaired, but that will work on it. So it's done out of kindness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Never deliberate.
Yeah, of course.
But it's just getting those things set in really quickly. Oh, there's something quite satisfying if you've got a bundle of letters and you've gone through them, flattened them out, cleaned them, you know they're now safe to be handled, and then this is not the right size, but because I know this has got tears, I wouldn't want to fold this back up. Sometimes you do, but I think with these ones, because they're a bit more damaged, I would then have them put in an appropriate folder or stored flat, and then these would all be individually numbered. And they will be, actually. Okay, so with archive collections, you might find that you will end up with a variety of different formats. There's no standard format for an archive, and sometimes you'll come across things that we might see as obsolete. So what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about what archiving is and what the process of cataloguing is when you have an archive or a collection in your community you're wanting to look after. Essentially, a catalogue is a way of providing a descriptive list that details what's held within the collection, and it's also a way of enabling your community or researchers or individuals to come and access the collection. They are organised at different levels, so you can have some that are item listed, which means every single thing has an item, and some that are done at a kind of bundle level or a description level on there for you. So with this collection here, so these are just copies of documents and some items that you might find. So for example, you might have like floppy disks, memory sticks, CDs, DVDs, and VHS. So range of options with these. You can get them digitized, you can run them through software packages to ensure that there's no viruses on them, and get them uploaded to a digital archive. Works in two ways, as a form of preservation and also a way to access the material again. You also have born digital records, but I think that'll be for a different session. We also have things like photographs. So these are copies of something that were glass plate negatives. So you can have the glass plates, you can have the negatives, you can have slides, and you can also just have copies. So these can be digital or physical again. Some photographs will need specialist material, but the best option is to get in touch with a conservator around that. You can also things like letters and correspondence from people, and then you might have things like ledgers or books. So this is just an item that wasn't going into an archive. Could have been a scrapbook or paintings or drawings on there. So you can get quite a range of bits and pieces. You can get things like plans, also maps, and you can get published materials. So that might be community publications, literature that's published, and it's really up to yourselves whether you keep that in your archive. So with a cataloguing process, we have to discuss arrangement and how that might work. So this is quite a varied collection to do. And what we tend to look at is working out the best structure for that collection. So most archives across the world use a system called ISA-G, which is a general international standard of archival description. So that defines the fields that we're using. There's lots of information online on how to do this on various websites. Also, Scottish Council and Archives would be the place to start. You would have a reference number. So for example, if it was the archive I work in, we have what's called a specific identifier code, which is GB3219. And then we would have our own reference number. So say it was SL/D, so that's Skye Localsh/D is the start of it, and this would be collection number 1. That's what the catalogue's identifier would be. And for instance, we would just call this one collection of Skye Localsh. We'll just give it a general name. So you could have things like collection of Duncan Macpherson, which is photographs and pharmacy one. You could have one say Isle of Eigg Buyout, Isle of Eigg History Society, or you could have it just whatever. If it's an individual or a business, you could have it by that name. Completely up to yourselves. So that would be your title. So different formats, we've covered over those. And then name of creators. So with some collections, you might have multiple creators. So we need to make sure we know who's created them. And that also links into discussions around copyright and permissions. And any information like custodial history you can gather. And that can be as simple as in the attic of somebody's house or in the business of wherever. So just gathering as much information as you can. So when it comes to the description, of the items, it's good to work out a structure and an order for yourselves. When you are ready to start getting a collection together, you're going to look at series level. So we would tend to start with things like minutes, annual reports, accounts, and correspondence, and that can include financial records as well. So if we just say that this is the minutes of the organisation, we would have that as the top one, and then we'd have things like annual reports or correspondence, and then we might just say this is a bundle of financial records. So you'd have those. Any things like title deeds or relating to properties, they would come in next. Things like estate maps and plans would come in there as well. So there's different structures and different levels. You can have a section for published materials, and that usually comes toward the end of a collection. So it's just really about building the structure on there for you. So when you're getting your structure together and you're starting at your first series, so series 1 would be minutes or correspondence with the business. So that would be your first series. Your second series would be your letters or like financial records. You could put your third series as maps and plans. And then your fourth series could be like photographs. And it could also have photography and film in the same one if you wished. Depending on what is contained on these discs. If these discs were financial records or internal emails, they would go into the business ones. If they're photographs, they would then move to the photograph collection. So it's just finding out what's on them. So sometimes with obsolete software or formats, then you can get advice and guidance on how to get access to them. Same with these, we've got a range, so we've got audio, visual, sound, and then you've got things like memory sticks. So they would have their own category or might fall into another one on there. So series level is really just building your structure for the collection. And there's two things you need to consider. One is remembering something called original order. So for example, if somebody has a bundle of letters and they're all wrapped up together, they've probably placed them that way themselves, and there's a reason that they did that. You might find a photograph stuck in between one. You might find they've kept some letters relating to a wedding together or other bundles of legal documents together. The temptation to reorganize it is always there. So we try and retain original order as much as possible. There is instances where a collection is just coming in, it's in a burach, and you have to give it structure. Makes it easier for researchers too, but original order is really important. So if it's a business collection, there might be obvious business functions or relationships between the records. That can be like minutes, annual reports, accounts, correspondence. If it's something like an estate collection, so that might be quite frequent within community land buyouts. You might have things like title deeds and properties, estate management, maps and plans, photographs and ephemera as well. So there's structures that you can follow which help keep it organised and easy for people to come in and ask questions. If somebody goes, do you have a map of Assynt? Then you can go to the map section and know it's there. You're not having to maybe rifle through another few boxes. There's also different series levels depending on the type of organisation or the type of collection. And once you decide on which series you're going to have, then you can work out the kind of running of that series. So you might put constitution, minutes, financial records, insurance, memberships. You might break it down more into smaller chunks. But again, look at guidance on the different websites, get in touch with your local archive, and we're always happy to help on there. If it's an individual, so it's an individual person who may have been involved in a buyout or a campaign that was happening, you might start with personal papers first, and then papers relating to Community Land Scotland, publications they might have done, and that could be anything from things like books, journals that they've written, one-off newspaper cuttings can go in there as well. Then you might have things like photograph and souvenirs on there. So that's an example for an individual on there. And it depends on how much they've collated and gathered, and some of that could also be digital records. So email correspondence might be included in there too. So different series, they can also be divided into sub-series, which takes us into another kind of, it's like a tree, another branch. But that, again, look at the guidance around that. So sub-series, it might be a business organisation where you've got correspondence, and then maybe you've had different members of or directors of boards. So you might break it down into them individually. So sub-series I've done recently was in an estate. So we had estate papers, and a chunk of them were releasing to the East India Company and the estate, and the other ones were the estate and Skye. So we broke them kind of down into two areas on there. I know, grim. So ultimately, cataloguing is a way for you to describe a whole collection at each level, and you can describe it into smaller bits and even smaller bits if you want. So that would be right down to item level. So each individual page or item has its own identifier. The resulting catalogue has a tree structure. It's always a way to kind of visualize it in your head, and that lets you track the relationships between the collection, the organisation, or even if it's a theme or a topic on there. So this isn't a full detailed version of what cataloguing is. It's the very basics of what we do. So there's different websites that you can access. One is the National Archives, which have guidance for the whole of the UK. There's the Scottish Council and Archives. There's also ARA Scotland, and there's a great resource on Community Archives and Heritage Group. They have everything from guidance on how to set up an archive, how to get funding, how to do cataloguing, and it's got a really good support network. And of course, approach your local archive centre or hub and find out and speak to them. They're always willing to help.